The summer of 1984 in American Fork, Utah, was supposed to be a time of celebration, of community, and of quiet family life. But beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic setting, a chilling darkness was brewing, fueled by radical religious beliefs and a twisted sense of divine justice. On July 24th, a day meant for festivities, an unspeakable act of violence shattered the peace, leaving a young mother and her infant daughter brutally murdered, all in the name of a terrifying doctrine known as Blood Atonement. This is the story of how faith was perverted into a motive for murder, and how two brothers, Ron and Dan Lafferty, brought a nightmare to life. Remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Calendar of Crime. Ron Lafferty, the eldest of 8 children, was once a respected chiropractor and a seemingly devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, his life began to unravel in the early 1980s as he delved deeper into fundamentalist interpretations of Mormonism, particularly the concept of plural marriage and the idea of blood atonement, a belief that certain sins are so grievous they can only be expiated by the shedding of the sinner's own blood. His increasingly extreme views alienated him from his family, especially his wife, Diana, who eventually left him, taking their 6 children. Dan Lafferty, Ron's younger brother, was also drawn into these radical beliefs. He too became convinced of the righteousness of their fundamentalist interpretations and the idea that they were chosen by God for a special purpose. As Ron's influence grew, Dan became his devoted follower, embracing the same distorted doctrines that would ultimately lead them down a path of unimaginable violence. Their descent into fanaticism was gradual but relentless, fueled by a sense of persecution and a conviction that they alone understood God's true will. Brenda Wright Lafferty, the wife of their brother Alan, was a vibrant and intelligent young woman who had recently moved to Utah from Idaho. She was a former beauty queen, a talented dancer, and a student at Brigham Young University. Brenda was a strong, independent spirit who openly challenged Ron's increasingly radical views, particularly his desire to practice polygamy and his abusive treatment of his wife. Her outspoken nature and her refusal to conform to their extremist ideology made her a target in the eyes of Ron and Dan. Ron Lafferty claimed to receive divine revelations, which he called removal revelations. These were a list of individuals Ron believed God wanted removed from the earth. Brenda and her infant daughter, Erica, were on this list. Brenda was targeted because she had encouraged Ron's wife, Diana, to leave him and had expressed doubts about his extremist interpretations of their faith. Erica, Brenda's 15-month-old daughter, was included in the revelation because Ron believed she would grow up to be just like her mother. The chilling justification for these murders was rooted in the twisted concept of blood atonement, where the shedding of blood was seen as a means to cleanse sins and ensure salvation. On July 24, 1984, while Utah celebrated Pioneer Day, Ron and Dan Lafferty drove to American Fork. Their first stop was the home of their brother, Richard, who they believed was also on the removal revelation list. However, Richard was not home. Undeterred, they proceeded to Alan and Brenda Lafferty's apartment. They forced their way in, where they found Brenda and Erica. What followed was a horrific act of violence. Brenda was brutally beaten and then strangled with a vacuum cleaner cord. Erica, the innocent infant, was nearly decapitated with a butcher knife. The brothers then fled the scene, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. The investigation quickly focused on Ron and Dan Lafferty. Their radical religious beliefs and Ron's removal revelations provided a clear motive. Both brothers were apprehended shortly after the murders. During their interrogations, they openly confessed to the killings, with Ron maintaining that he was acting under divine command. Their unwavering belief in the righteousness of their actions, even in the face of such brutality, shocked the community and the nation. The trials of Ron and Dan Lafferty were complex and highly publicized. Dan Lafferty chose to represent himself, arguing that he was merely following God's will. He was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison. Ron Lafferty's trial was even more protracted, marked by questions of his mental competency. He was eventually found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder and sentenced to death. He spent decades on death row, continuing to espouse his extremist views, until his death from natural causes in 2019. The legacy of the Lafferty murders continues to resonate, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of religious extremism and the perversion of faith. The tragedy not only devastated the Lafferty family, but also cast a shadow over the wider community, forcing a painful examination of how radical ideologies can lead to such horrific acts. Brenda and Erica Lafferty became symbols of innocent lives lost to a twisted interpretation of divine justice, their story a cautionary tale etched into the annals of true crime. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime.